Have you ever wondered why Ottawa, of all places, is the capital of Canada? I mean, shouldn't it be a bustling metropolis like Toronto or a cultural hub like Montreal? It seems like an odd choice, right? Well, the story behind it is a fascinating tale of rivalry, politics, and a queen's clever decision. Grab a snack because we're about to dive into one of Canadian history's biggest plot twists. Back in the mid-19th century, before Canada was even a country as we know it, there was the province of Canada, which was basically modern-day Ontario and Quebec. This was a forced marriage between two very different groups, the mostly English-speaking Protestant Upper Canada and the mostly French-speaking Catholic Lower Canada. As you can imagine, they didn't always see eye to eye. One of the biggest sources of tension was deciding on a capital city. It was like a game of musical chairs, but with entire cities. For years, the capital bounced between several contenders: Kingston, Montreal, Toronto, and Quebec City. Each time the government moved, it was a massive, expensive, and chaotic undertaking. They had to pack up all the government documents, furniture, and ferry everyone to the new location. It was incredibly inefficient. The rivalry was intense. Toronto and Montreal were the two biggest and most powerful cities, and each one felt they were the rightful choice. The problem was, choosing one would have deeply offended the other. If Toronto was picked, the French Canadians would feel marginalized. If Montreal was chosen, the English Canadians would be up in arms. The political deadlock was so bad that they couldn't agree on anything. The politicians were at each other's throats, and the province was becoming ungovernable. This bickering went on for years. The government was essentially homeless, rotating between cities and getting nothing done. It was clear this couldn't continue. They needed a permanent, stable home for the government. But who could possibly make a decision that wouldn't start a civil war? They were stuck. So, in 1857, in a move of desperation and genius, they punted the decision across the Atlantic Ocean. They asked Queen Victoria to choose the capital for them. Think about that. They were so divided, they asked a monarch thousands of kilometers away to pick the most important city in their land. It was a huge gamble. Queen Victoria was presented with a list of potential cities. Besides the big four, Toronto, Montreal, Quebec City, and Kingston, a few smaller towns were also thrown into the mix, almost as an afterthought. One of these was a rough-and-tumble little logging town called Ottawa. At the time, Ottawa was known as Bytown. It was a gritty frontier town, famous for its lumber industry and rowdy lumberjacks. It wasn't exactly a picture of sophistication. So, when the announcement came that Queen Victoria had chosen Ottawa, everyone was stunned. People were shocked. The politicians in Quebec City literally laughed out loud when they heard the news. They thought it was a joke. How could the Queen choose this backwoods village in the middle of nowhere? But the Queen wasn't foolish. Her decision was a stroke of political genius, and there were several very strategic reasons behind it. First, and most importantly, was its location. Ottawa sat right on the border between Upper and Lower Canada, the Ottawa River. It was the perfect compromise. It was neither in the heart of English-speaking territory nor French-speaking territory. It was a neutral ground, a symbolic bridge between the two founding cultures. Choosing Ottawa didn't favor one side over the other, which was crucial for keeping the peace. Second, there was the issue of security. Remember, this was not long after the War of 1812. Relations with the United States were still tense. Cities like Toronto and Montreal were considered vulnerable to an American attack because they were so close to the border. Ottawa, on the other hand, was located further inland, surrounded by dense forests and connected by the Rideau Canal. This canal was actually built as a military supply route precisely for this reason, to bypass the vulnerable St. Lawrence River. In a time of potential conflict, Ottawa was a much more defensible position for a capital. Third, Ottawa had the economic potential. Yes, it was a lumber town, but that meant it had a booming economy and was growing rapidly. It had the resources and the land available to build a grand capital from scratch. Unlike the established cities, which were already crowded, Ottawa was a blank canvas. They could design and build impressive parliament buildings and government offices without having to tear down an existing city. It was an opportunity to create a capital that truly represented the ambitions of a new, growing nation. The Queen's advisors had carefully considered all these points. The decision wasn't random, it was a masterclass in diplomacy and long-term planning. It solved the political deadlock, addressed security concerns, and looked towards the future. Of course, not everyone was happy. The established cities grumbled, and many thought the decision was a disaster. But construction began. On a majestic cliff overlooking the Ottawa River, they began to build the Parliament buildings. These stunning Gothic revival structures were a statement. They were designed to rival the great buildings of Europe and show the world that this new nation was serious. The construction itself was a massive project, employing thousands and transforming the rugged town of Ottawa into a true capital city. When Confederation happened in 1867, and the Dominion of Canada was officially born, Ottawa was ready. It seamlessly became the capital of the new country. The decision that was once laughed at proved to be one of the most important and successful decisions in Canadian history. It helped to unite a divided people and set the foundation for the country we know today. So, the next time someone asks why Toronto or Vancouver isn't the capital, you'll know the answer. It's not about being the biggest or the flashiest. It's about balance, security, and a Queen's surprisingly shrewd choice that shaped a nation. Ottawa's story is a reminder that sometimes the best solution is the one that no one sees coming. A compromise that builds a bridge instead of a wall. I hope you enjoyed that little trip through Canadian history. It's a story that I find absolutely fascinating. If you like this video and want to learn more cool stories from the past, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. It really helps us out. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.